Hey everybody, this is Perch, and every now and then people send me videos of other YouTubers or articles, and the basic question, I've gotten this a lot, is, hey, do you agree with this take? Do you agree? And generally it's, you know, analysis on why a creator is doing something. Why does Mags do what Mags does? Why does Mark Wade do what Mark Wade does, etc. And people have spent plenty of time thinking about that, making videos about it. Some of these series, I'm sure, are fine. They're all speculative. I mean, who knows? But it got me thinking. I was looking at one that came in a few minutes ago. One of these questions, like, "Hey, what do you think of this video? And do you think this assessment of the creator is correct?" And my initial reaction when I read the mail, like the first thing that popped in my head was, I don't care. I don't care why this creator is doing, and how weird it is that I'm getting more questions about creator behavior than character behavior. And I mean, we're all comic fans, right? I mean, we like comics, we want to read comics, and then I started thinking about it more and more and more, and this is something that has evolved and transformed in the last, let's say, 5-6 years, where there's a lot of thought and visibility and attention and analysis on creators. And slowly, if you're thinking of this like a pie chart of all the things comics, one big pie chart, everything comics, and you've got, the fictional creator, the fictional characters, and the creators all in this pie chart. I remember many, 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 many conversations, and you've had them too, around, hey, what do we think about Thor? How would he feel if, how does he feel about Sif, really? And how does Balder fit into it? And, what about, what's going on over there? And, like, do you ever think that Jason Todd wonders if he would have done things more like Tim Drake if it would have worked? I mean, you had this analysis of characters. But in the last, certainly 10 years, but really the last 5-6 years, the analysis is more around, why does Tom King do what he does? Why is Mags doing that? Why is whoever why is Mark Brooks do what Mark Brooks does? And what strikes me is how thoroughly dull analysis of why Mark Brooks does things is. Like, who cares? And it's, of course, what's happened here is social media, because now you can look up these creators and you can see their lives. And what's important to recognize is, if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, certainly there were plenty of colorful stories. We've seen some of them, we've heard some of them. I mean, Steve Ditko, the late, great, incredible Steve Ditko. If there was Twitter and Steve Ditko had a feed, it would be I don't know, but it would be hilarious. I mean, it would be the absolute crazy lunatic feed, and there would be videos on it, and people would be doing all kinds of analysis on that kind of stuff. But we didn't have social media then, and generally the creator stories were kept to the creators and their close personal friends. That entire world, if you penetrated it, it was the phrasing. It was very much a special, private, small world where still a lot of the craziness. You've heard stories about people and their various things going on with Jim Shooter. What when Jim Shooter was fired, John Byrne, was it Byrne? Made a pinata and burned it in effigy or something, like at a party or something. I mean, there's all these stories, kind of the lore of comic stories. But these stories were private, or at least they were smaller. They were kept within a very small comic community. They weren't broadcast everywhere. And my theory here is that generally, as comic readers, as people who are want to enjoy and collect and keep the focus on the characters, that made our lives better. This is not me saying, hey, just ignore all this stuff, because you can't anymore. You can't ignore; it's in your face. And it's not just social media. If you go to comic news sites, so if you take this thread and you say, once upon a time we had like Comic Buyers Weekly, and it would publish stories, and it would give information about comics, and then eventually that changed out to a different kind of newsletter, and then eventually that turned into and so on. You go through the steps of time until you get to Bleeding Cool, which is where we are today. And if you look at Bleeding Cool, for example, Bleeding Cool is super, super excited to talk about creator personal drama and shenanigans and all that kind of stuff as much as humanly possible. I think the characters, the actual psychology of what's going on with the things that are happening inside the comic book, are largely boring and dull to even the news sites that cover them. There's a lot of big moments, and we've had chats with people on this show where writers are out there just think they believe they're swinging for the fences. They're telling these amazing storylines, deep lore, big kind of things, and they get frustrated because comic news isn't covering it. Right now, if we are, you heard this in the interview with Sean Murphy, where he's got the White Knight comic, the new one that's out, and there's a big, like, the Joker hologram AI is implanted in Bruce's head. He can't get rid of it. Harley Quinn and Bruce are married. There's kids running around that maybe they're Bruce's. I mean, we don't know, they're not Bruce's. But anyway, there's a whole dynamic to the story and what's going on in those things. However, a Bleeding Cool wants to do another story about an accusation of love bombing that occurred 2 years ago. That's the more interesting thing for the comic news. I mean, again, it's easy to point the finger at Twitter and Facebook and say, well, there's a bunch of crap over there, but what do you expect? It is Twitter and Facebook, so that it is what it is. But that doesn't explain the actual news sites are also more interested in that drama. And so it gets to this, why is it that people, by and large, especially again, it's easy drama's fascinating. It's a reason why there's so many reality shows that deal in it. There's a reason why people talk about it. It's fascinating. Okay, this isn't a knock on the customers or the fans, but why are the people in the industry, the hiding McDonald's of the beat? I mean, go look at these sites sometime and just do this basic, pie chart in your head, this basic analysis. How many of the stories are about comics and how many of the stories are about various shenanigans going on with the creators themselves? What's the breakdown there? I think what you'll find is that the stories about the creators, the drama stories, are far outstripping the stories about comics. And it's not even close in most sites. To a fair, Newsarama and CBR, Newsarama for sure, CBR mostly, does keep the balance the other direction. But it is tilting over time. And so my theory or my question or my premise, whatever you want to go with, is how much of this constant insistence of comic news media pushing things that are not in the comics, how much that is impacting our ability to actually enjoy these stories, connect with these stories. I mean, how many storylines are actually pretty good out there, or at least reasonable, and they take a while to sink in and get met traction and get popularity? How many of those are not getting those things because there's simply no airtime? We're devoting it all to, I don't know, whatever Heather Antos is bitching about this month or week or day. I mean, how much of it is about, look, when Tom King was settling his run on Batman, why is it that the biggest stories that occurred kind of around that time period have to do with kind of yelling at somebody for not wearing a mask at a convention? I guess it was after the whole drama with Jay Lee, the hiring a bodyguard for San Diego Comic-Con. Like, the stories that both he pushed and also the comic news pushed were about him. Meanwhile, he's doing this story. I mean, do you remember that in Tom King's Batman, I mean, basically his dad is back from another multiverse dimension, takes over Gotham, enslaves all of the criminals, including the Joker and everything, has them run around as police. Batman has to get in there. Alfred's dead. Granted, the Alfred dead story got a lot of traction, but there were so many stories and so many moments that really got lost in the noise of Tom King's personal life and the gossip of him. Now, I have no idea. I think some creators like it that way. Some creators definitely do not. But regardless of whether they do or they don't, this is the trap they're all in. This is what we're going to cover. This is what we're going to talk about. That's it. And there's no room for anything else. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating a little bit here, but it feels like a lot of the issues we have, because again, I'm looking at the mails, I'm looking at what people are sending in asking for questions, and the more I see people saying, "Hey, why is I don't know, pick your poison? Why is Tess Fowler, doing this lunatic thing over here?" And it's like, I don't know. There's roughly 200 comic book characters doing things. Now, to be fair, a lot of these stories are unmemorable. Again, I think this is one of those, it's like a litmus test for the industry. Not only is the comic, well, here again, my theory on top of a theory is that by and large, the comic news sites are reporting on this stuff because, frankly, there's not enough meat or interest in the actual comics themselves. There's not enough to them. So therefore, we're going to report on, I don't know, whatever Dan Slott said on Twitter that is maybe racist, or not sure. That is a more interesting topic to deal with than what's being written in, say, the Fantastic Four, the comic he was just on. He's doing right now this Reckoning War, which he has teed up for, I mean, Christ, how long? 20 years or more? That's been a long ass time. He's teed up this storyline. He says something that is transphobic on Twitter gets more attention than the Reckoning War storyline that he's been building to for decades. Does that? I mean, is there a ding ding ding? Hey, maybe there's a problem here. I think that's a pretty clear indication that stuff's off the rails. Again, I'm not blaming you, the customer, the fan. I'm not blaming any of those people. I'm not even blaming the creators themselves. I'm saying there should be a wake-up call saying, hey, for all of us, we are off track because what our news media is covering is increasingly not the comics. Now, again, I do think there's some creators who absolutely like it that way, who are out for attention, who do things for attention. I mean, look, to me, and this is my own personal opinion, opinion of one, the reason why Heather Antos says crazy shit on Twitter is because it gets her attention every time, without fail. People will respond, they'll do videos, they'll put a little sad face, Heather Antos says this, and she lives for that. Literally, you're just feeding her the dopamine that keeps that train running. That is all that's there. You are giving her gifts with your attention. She's all about it. I would say most creators probably are not. I would say most creators probably would rather the attention go on their actual work. But I may be wrong about that. Any sensible creator would know that attention is fleeting and, ultimately probably a little unhealthy. But, to each their own. But I think it's a powerful wake up call to say, hey, we've gone off track. When not just the people following us on Twitter, but the actual people covering the comic book industry are far more interested in our personal dramas and crap than what we're writing and creating. So maybe we should all regroup here, put our heads together and try and do something else. I don't know. By the way, I think some of these news media sites and everything else for comics should take them, do a little look in the mirror, because Heidi McDonald will regularly want to trash on YouTube people for stirring up drama, and it's like, hey, have you looked at your site lately? You're stirring up an equal amount of drama, just for a different direction. It's all drama. Again, if you want to get really hard and literal about it, comic book news, character information, creator, news and creator drama and information, the balance has tilted. And a lot of the sites that spend an immense amount of time bitching about YouTubers and hate people on Twitter and all the rest of that stuff, you're feeding it. Absolutely, you're feeding it. So, just saying. Anyway, what do I think about this stuff? Stupid is as stupid does, right? A lot of this stuff is stupid. A lot of these people, their dad should have given them good spanking when they were younger. I guess that's the best way to put it. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening.